Holy mother cow, they can hear me in Provo. Okie dokie. Okay, are we ready? What do I have here? That was February, okay. I'm going to call this meeting to order for the Historic Landmarks Commission this Thursday, March 7th. And we have one public hearing tonight. And if you have any cards, you can submit your request to speak this evening. So there we have it. Do we have any minutes from the last meeting that need to be approved? I believe so. Does anybody have any changes for the minutes? Does anybody want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move to approve.
Great. And second?
I'll second.
All right. So we have a motion to approve and second. All in favor? I have to use the roll call votes on these. John?
Aye.
Mike is absent. Adrian?
Aye.
Carlton?
Aye.
Amanda?
Aye.
Michael Abramson?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
Jared?
Abstain. I wasn't here.
Abstain, wasn't here. And Alan?
Aye.
Aye, and I say aye, so it passes. Great. All righty then. Do we have any public comments regarding anything not pertaining to this hearing? I haven't seen any. Cindy, nothing? Okay. Since we just did a vote, I think that will also be true for our tally, so that we do have a majority here, a quorum. Do we have any reports of the chair and vice chair? None from me, none from you. How about the director or acting?
Yeah, just update on a couple of new local historic districts. On March 5th of this year, the Princeton Heights, Laird Heights, the new historic district, was approved by the city council on March 5th. If you remember where that was, it's kind of near 13th East, 13th South area, small little neighborhood area there. So that has been approved. And then it looks like the Princeton Heights new local historic district is scheduled for a public hearing with the city council on March 26th, with a potential vote on April 2nd, unless they go ahead and decide to adopt it that night. So one new historic district, and then another one potentially on the way.
I have a question from an email I received about the city council and the mayor working to take I'm making these numbers up, the 28 kinds of zoning down to 6 kinds of zoning. Can you comment about what in the world is going on there?
Yeah, it's something that we in the planning division are working on right now. So yeah, we have like that said, about 28, actually more different zoning districts that are considered mixed use districts, or districts that allow residential and commercial. And so what we are working on is doing a major consolidation, and because we have a lot of different zoning districts that essentially kind of end up doing the same thing or something similar. And so consolidating a lot of those zoning districts into 6 zoning districts, just to make things cleaner, make it easier to navigate in the ordinance. We're going to be spending quite a bit of time in the next month developing some draft language and ensuring that we have all of kind of the design standards and everything else that's in the existing code into these consolidated districts. And it's an ambitious effort.
Indeed.
We're hoping to get to the Planning Commission by the end of this year.
And that's where it will start?
Well, it's starting now with the drafting of the code.
Okay.
And then as we kind of progress and we get some things developed, then we'll start kind of figuring out our public engagement process. And part of that public engagement process will be visiting the commissions and giving briefings and things like that. But we haven't gotten that far yet.
Do you have to go, are you also going to go to all the city councils
We're gonna,
or
we're gonna,
community councils?
that's right. We're gonna, and we haven't figured out the public engagement yet. It's gonna be a big undertaking.
Indeed. Thank you for that. Anything else?
That's it for me.
All right. And so we'll consider that the report of the director for now. General comments, we don't have any general comments, so we have one public hearing tonight. Sorry. We have one public hearing tonight, Planning and Historic Landmarks Commission Membership and Appeals Hearing Officer Term Limit Text Amendment. Our staff contact here is Olivia, and it's case number PLNPCM 202300986. Olivia?
Yes, thank you. Quite the mouthful of a name. I'm Olivia Savetko. I'm newer to the planning department, so some of you may not have gotten the chance to meet me yet, but it's great to be here. Bear with me as I struggle through any technology hiccups. Okay, so this is the Planning and Historic Landmark Commission Membership and Appeals Hearing Officer Term Limit Text Amendment. Mayor Mendenhall initiated this petition. The purpose is to remove the minimum required commissioner members from Planning Commission and Historic Landmark Commission, leaving the maximum, and removing language that limits the amount of consecutive terms an appeals hearing officer can be reappointed to. Tonight, I'm recommending that you forward a positive recommendation to the Planning Commission, and these changes will affect Section 21A06 for decision-making officials. Okay, so currently our code stipulates Planning Commission shall consist of a minimum of 9 and a maximum of 11 commissioners. The Historic Landmark Commission shall consist of a minimum of 7 and a maximum of 11 commissioners. And appeals hearing officers can be reappointed for up to 2 consecutive 5-year terms. The proposed amendments will remove that minimum language from both commissions, leaving a maximum of 11 members with no minimum for the Planning Commission and Historic Landmark Commission. And you'll see in our code, we call our Planning Commission and our Historic Landmark Commission boards that are subject to the state law requiring these commissions to comply with the Open and Public Meetings Act, which requires those commissions to have at least 2 voting members. So there is a minimum built in there. And along with this, we are removing language that the appeals hearing officer can be reappointed to 2 full consecutive terms, and instead stating that they will serve a 5-year term and they may be reappointed. So the reason this came about, this is something that staff believes will further our ability to run things efficiently, remain a collaborative, responsive, and transparent local government. This reduces the likelihood that our land use decisions and business items get postponed and delayed due to unexpected resignations or changes in either of these commission structure. Also, allowing our appeals hearing officer to serve more than 2 full consecutive 5-year terms allows the city to retain reliable and knowledgeable appeals hearing officers that we have worked with, and they're familiar with our code and ordinances, and we would like to be able to hold on to those officers. So our recommendation today, as I stated at the beginning, based on the information in the staff report that you've been provided and the discussion to follow, we are recommending that you forward a positive recommendation to the Planning Commission for the proposed text amendment.
Thank you, Olivia, and that's nice. You didn't have to come in and talk about painting brick, replacing windows. Do any of you have any questions for her?
I have a question. How does this relate to the district representation that I know isn't required on commissions, but is something that's discussed in relation to commissions, like the city council districts is what I mean in particular?
Yes, sorry, excuse me. So that won't change how we're reappointing or appointing people to represent the city. The idea of this recommendation, and correct me if I'm wrong, is just to be able to continue to function in case, you know, someone resigns at the 9th hour and we all of a sudden have to postpone all of our business items and things like that. The city...
Wait, I'm going to interrupt. You wouldn't foresee that, for example, it might be a commission of 4 or 5 and that they're all from District 2? I'm making this up.
I'll jump in.
Yes.
The city strives always to have representation from every district. Like I said, it's not necessarily required, but it is something that we strive for. Maintaining the maximum of 11, we're going to continue to try to get that representation, but it doesn't mean that we always get it.
Right.
And so, yeah, we may drop down in numbers at some point of time, but even when we drop down in numbers, we'll still be able to conduct business, and we'll still continue to try to get more people involved from every district.
Is that verbiage in there at all? Like our intent is to have equal representation?
I have seen that language somewhere, but I can't remember if that's in the code or in the website. But I can search around for you.
Okay. Any other questions? Sorry to interrupt, but...
No, you're fine.
I'm looking at the staff report, and it does mention that on page 2 of the staff report, just for your reference, Babs.
Oh, I missed that. What number?
It says the applicant pools are reviewed as vacancies arise. The applicants are interviewed if they have a skill set that has been identified as beneficial to a board and from a district needing representation.
Okay, that should handle it.
Based on my search of the document, is the only mention of that particular use of district. There's lots of uses of historic district, obviously.
And I'm not saying anything nefarious or thinking anything nefarious is going on. But it would be a logical question like, oh, only this side is being represented. And I know that we've had trouble filling West Side applicants on the commission as well. So good to know that. Good intent there. And I think, didn't this happen because a couple of planning commissioners quit all of a sudden and they couldn't do business for a bit? Wayne, was that true? Was it this year? No.
Sorry about that. I missed that question.
Last year,
we did find a section in the code, by the way, that it does say should represent.
Yeah,
okay. What was that question?
Didn't we have a couple of planning commissioners quit all of a sudden last year that kind of prompted this discussion?
Yes.
And then the city couldn't do any business about this for a minute because of
Yeah,
that?
we've had that happen a few times over the last number of years where it's put us in a bit of a pinch.
Okay. Groovy. Any other questions? Okay.
I've got a comment. My experience with appointments and term limits is from a nonprofit background. And the hairs on my neck stood up when I read this because that's automatically a red flag to me. Because you have to assume that when you get the worst person in there, there's got to be a way to rectify the situation. That's hypothetical. So that is my major concern.
And I've never been present. Let's see, I was 8 years on planning, and I've never been present where they got rid of one. How do we get rid of one?
Well,
Term limits.
Term limit? Oh, true, yes.
Well, there's
besides that?
still, though, each commissioner, as well as the appeals hearing officer, they still have their specific terms. And so at the end of that term, they still actually have to be actually selected, recommended by the mayor, and approved by the city council. So it's not like you're automatically on forever. The process is still in place. It just allows us to retain. Appeals hearing officers are a little different ballgame. I mean, they are people that we need in place that know our processes, know our codes, because it is a very legal type of thing. So eliminating the term limits helps when we do have somebody that's good and knows those processes. We can keep them if we need to.
And given what's happened with the school board and South Salt Lake City Council, do we have any rules or regulations about censuring? It seems to
I
be
don't
coming
know.
up a lot lately. Yes, no?
I don't know off the top of my head.
We might want to look into that since it seems to be a hot topic lately,
Yeah.
particularly in Utah. We've had 2 people censured in rather public positions.
Yeah, there's been, I mean, I've worked for the city for a long time, and I do know a couple of situations where maybe a commissioner hasn't, I don't know, behaved appropriately for a few meetings. And
Actually, these have been pointed directly at people in these positions posting on social media
Yeah,
and being
and-
unethical.
in a lot of those cases, we've been able to have a sit down with the individual. The mayor has a sit down with the individual. There is a process for, removing commissioners.
That's what I wanted to know.
Censure has been in, a hot topic in discussion of many public offices because for those offices, removal was not available, but that is not the case for any member of a board or commission. The mayor can remove them for cause. Obviously, that's something, the city attorney's office is going to be involved in because, of course, we're not going to be infringing on anyone's First Amendment rights. But the need to exercise a censure option is just not as big of an issue because is on the table for those officers.
Good to know. Thank you. Okay, well then let's open up.
I have one more.
Oh, sorry.
I had one more comment I
Yes.
wanted to make. It seems to me that the purpose of the law is to set guardrails for government, to make sure the government doesn't go too far out of certain lanes. And so I understand that the purpose of the guardrails is to leave enough flexibility that the government can function optimally, but still not go too far astray. And it seems odd to me to just take one of the guardrails away, to say, well, we just have no guardrail on one side. Instead of saying, well, okay, we're going to give a little more leeway and say, well, the Landmarks Commission has to have at least 7. Well, that's too tight a guardrail for us, so we're going to drop it to 5. No, we're just going to drop that guardrail entirely. And I know that the thought is, well, but no administration would really let it go that low. But if it can, there may be administration. I've watched government in the United States in the last few years, and you can see when there aren't guardrails, there are sometimes people will, and I'm not saying the current administration will do that, but when you remove a guardrail entirely, it means someone can go there and they can do it legally, and they can run, if they want to run the Landmarks Commission with 2 commissioners who are handpicked to do what they want to do, then they can do that. And so it seems to me like it's a real problem to remove guardrails entirely. It's not a problem necessarily to widen the guardrails to allow for a little more flexibility, but to say we have no guardrails, that to me seems like a real problem. And I know that nobody's thinking like, oh, this is a way that we can get the commission down where we only have 2 people. But if someone did decide that, they can legally do it under these proposed changes. And so I would suggest that there should be a guardrail. Maybe more flexibility than what we currently have, because we've seen that. It seems like an overreaction to one situation where maybe a couple of commissioners resign, and so we say, oh, we got to fix this, and then we just way overcorrect and leave no guardrail. And I think that's I think that's bad policy. I think it's a poor way to manage it. So while I think it's a good idea, if we have seen from experience that we need a little more leeway, then by all means, let's create more leeway, but let's not take away the guardrail entirely, because then that just leaves it open for abuse. And if it's open for abuse, then it can be abused. So that's my thought.
Thank you. Anyone else? Then I'm going to open the public hearing, and I don't think we have anyone here from Community Council. Are you planning to speak? Cindy Cromer is here. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, there, that worked. So as my perspective on the number of commissioners is a little different, and it has to do with my belief that there always needs to be someone in the room who is an architect, an engineer, or has deep familiarity with building codes. And that means that this issue's come up before about how many architects should be on a commission. And I've said there has to be one in the room. If you need to have multiple people with that specific expertise on the commission to make sure that there's one in the room, then that's what you need to. So in addition to the conversation you've already had about how low could the number go, I want to express my concern that if the number goes low, it's less likely to have the kind of expertise that I feel is essential to have in the room, always. So that's that one. Then I thought I would take you down memory lane and let you know what the appeal process has been like and why it might be important to extend the terms of the hearing officers. So in the 80s, specifically in 1988, the appeal process was through the Board of Adjustment. The Board of Adjustment was a quasi-judicial body, so that makes sense. The Board of Adjustment had 3 members with 2 alternates. The problem was that under the old zoning ordinance, they also had agendas that were a page and a half long, single-spaced. So adding the appeals processes to the Board of Adjustment didn't go so well. So the city changed, and then they courted disaster by sending appeals to the city council, politicizing every disagreement about land use and clogging up the city council's agendas. That didn't last too terribly long. I can't tell you how long, but it was painful. So that's the second part of the appeal process as it evolved that I remember. The third was what was called the Land Use Appeals Board, which was a board of people with expertise, lawyers, planners, who would hear the appeals cases. This was, of course, before Zoom, and the problem was getting 3 people who had busy schedules to meet on an ad hoc basis. So my perception was that it really stretched out the appeal process because you had to find when board member X, Y, and Z were all open. And so the current appeal process with hearing officers was developed. I've now told you about 3 in my experience. This is the 4th one, and it came out of the starting gate with Craig Call, who wrote the book on planning and zoning, and Mary Woodhead and Matt Worthland. Mary and Matt were 2 of the finest planning commission members I've ever watched, even when I disagreed with them. They were superb. And they continue, I hope, to serve as hearing officers, and I would certainly urge you to keep them on board as long as possible. They do fine work, and we are fortunate to have them. The City Council just accepted 2 more appeals. Oops, I talked. That's great. At any rate, there are 2 new ones, and Mary Woodhead and Matt Worthland, and you would certainly want to retain people who are doing a superb job because it's a very specialized skill set, and we have a very contentious culture at the moment, and we are seeing lots of these appeals. So I would just urge you to extend the terms, and I think there always needs to be an architect or an engineer in the room, somebody who knows how to keep the structure up. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, there's no one else in the room. Does, I think I'll close the public hearing now. And normally this is where we rebut the applicant. I think at this point in time, we just need to go into executive session and discuss what we want to do. And what Cindy said was totally valid. I've worked with Mary Woodhead for years, and she's an attorney, so that's very helpful as well. And Matt Worthlin, he worked with him on planning as well. So we have good people in place, I must say. Commissioners, what are you thinking? Do you have any big issues with this?
I would agree with Alan. I don't want to blow everyone out of the room with this. I would agree with Alan that some degree of guardrail is reasonable on the low side. Eliminating it entirely and getting into a situation where it's conceivable, whether by design or by accident, that 2 or 3 people could be making decisions on the Planning Commission or the Historic Landmark Commission is probably not a good idea. I also agree with Cindy's perspective that having an architect or an engineer and other people that deal with historic structures from whether it's a real estate perspective or a preservation perspective, having that mix of views and experience is valuable, at least insofar as the Historic Landmark Commission is concerned. And if we did have 2 or 3 people, they could be 2 or 3 people that don't have that experience. So that would be the only reservation I have. I don't really have any concerns about the appeals officer's item, but having some threshold as a minimum would be appropriate.
Do you have a suggestion how that could be worded?
Well, if I forget what the numbers are offhand, is it for the Landmark Commission, is it 7 to 9? Yeah, 7 to 9, 7 to 11. I mean, part of it is ensuring that whoever's making those decisions between the mayor and the city council, there is an effort there to keep the number above what the minimum is. If there's a real struggle to find 7 or 6 people that really are committed to a commission, then we've got bigger problems that need to be addressed. You know, whether a differential of 2 on the Planning Commission is wide enough, that seems pretty narrow. But, I mean, I probably wouldn't go below 5 or 6 myself.
Can you go to the next page, the recommendation? And that is...
Yes, so the recommendation is no minimum, except for, of course, state law requires that we have at least 2 and a majority vote. Wow. Which may sometimes mean 3.
Interesting.
Yeah, because with 5 members, the majority would be 3 individuals.
Right. Others?
Sorry. I can speak to the qualifications just a little bit. We actually do have in the zoning ordinance and in the policies and procedures, direction on the makeup of the commission on qualifications. It's actually in the ordinance, and what the ordinance says is that we should do the very best possible to have at least 2 architects. That's actually in the ordinance. And then the rest of the makeup, it basically says at least 2 architects, and then residents at large possessing preservation-related experience in archaeology, architecture, architectural history, construction and history, folk studies, law, public history, real estate appraisal, and urban planning. So there is direction in the ordinance as to what we should be looking for, what the mayor should be looking for in the city council and making up the Landmark Commission.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that. If I can throw in, I mean, obviously I'm a bit biased. I agree with Cindy that an engineer should probably be included in that. But if the 2 architects that are selected are the 2 people that resign, suddenly you've got an issue there. So, I mean, if you get too small a number just by a law of small numbers versus large numbers, you're at risk, so.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you'd like a minimum of X on both commissions.
That's the way I would.
And what would be your recommendation? 5
5 would be the bare minimum for me,
for each one?
yes.
Okay. Others, comments?
I agree with Carlton on that. 5 is the bare minimum. And by saying there's no minimum, doesn't that put us directly in conflict with the state law that says we have to have 2? So.
It does not put us in conflict with the state law because we do not specify a minimum of 0. We just remove the language entirely and leave it at there's a maximum of 11 that could be appointed at any given time. Or in the case of Historic Landmark Commission, a maximum of, also 11.
I'd like to do a straw poll, commissioners. I'm hearing that we're kind of in favor of this, but we'd like some minimum on there. Would we be in agreement to say we'd like to see a minimum of 5 on each commission? Would that make everybody happy? Can I have some nods here? Okay, that's kind of where we're at right now. Wayne, what do you think? Would that kibosh the whole thing? Would the mayor have a problem with that?
No, this is the process. You
Okay.
know, we make our recommendation and we go to the individual commissions and you make your recommendation. So this is, yeah.
Great, excellent. Okay, well then I guess we need a motion. There's no other questions or comments? Go ahead.
I would move to forward a positive recommendation. Oh, okay, a positive recommendation on the recommended changes with the exception that a minimum for each commission be established at no less than 5 members.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Discussion? Nope, yes, nope? You just put your thing on green, okay.
Just let's call my name.
All right, well then, let's go ahead and vote. John?
Aye.
Mike is not here. Adrian?
Aye.
Carlton?
Aye.
Amanda?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
Jared?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
And I say aye. That is unanimous with Mike being out of town, so that's that. We have nothing else? Yes, no? Then the meeting is adjourned.